Hello and welcome to another Excel tips video. I'm Sumit Bansal, and in today's video I will show you everything you need to know about the Lambda function. Now the Lambda function has been in Excel for a couple of years now, and it is a different function. It's not like other regular Excel functions. It's a little different and it has a very specific use case. But once you completely understand how it works, it can be very powerful in some situations. Just to give you an idea, you can use a Lambda function to create your own custom functions without knowing any VBA, without any programming. Right within a cell, you can write a Lambda function and then convert it into your own formula. And you will see how powerful that is. Now, before I get into the Lambda function and show you how to create that and how to use it, I urge you to watch this video completely, because when I start explaining the Lambda function with some simple examples, you may think it's not impressive, you may think it's worthless, but it's not. I will explain with a basic example and then I'm going to move to more advanced use cases where you will start to see how Lambda function could be useful. So let's get into the worksheet and see how it works. Here I have these two numbers in cell A2 and B2, and I want to add these two numbers. Now obviously you don't need a Lambda function for this. You can do this using a simple formula such as A2 plus B2, or you can use a sum function such as sum A2 and then comma B2. Now this obviously is a very simple example, but let me show you how we can use a Lambda and create our own function to just add these two numbers. And once I've covered how the Lambda function works, then we can move on to some more advanced examples. So to create a Lambda function, let me first explain the arguments it takes. So the Lambda function can take a parameter or calculation. So if I want to write a Lambda function, let me write it here for you. It would take parameters, which could be something like a comma b, and then the calculation which involves these parameters, so which could be something like a plus b. Now these two are like any function arguments, where let's say if we are using some function, then we need to provide these two cell references A2 and B2. These are just like cell references, or these could be numeric or text values. And then in the end, always in the end, we would have the calculation that we want Lambda to do. So what we want in this case is Lambda should take two arguments A and B, and then it should give us the result, which is A plus B. Now this is the same construct that will be followed in all the examples, but the idea here is you need to first give Lambda an argument, which would be something like an A, B, or it could be any string. And then finally you will give the calculation that would involve those strings, those values, those variables. So let me create a Lambda function here, and the Lambda function I would create here would be, again, let's keep it simple and let's call it A comma B and then A plus B. And in this case, if I hit enter, it is going to give me the calculation error, because as of now, I have created the Lambda function. This is going to work just fine, but it still does not know what A and B are. So if I just want to use Lambda function right within this cell, I can provide these values in these brackets. So I can just come here and say A2 and comma B2. So A2 will be mapped to A, which is this cell reference, and then B2 will be mapped to B. And now when I hit enter, it gives me 30. So my Lambda function is working perfectly. Now just to reiterate again how it works, I first provided these two arguments because I know that my function needs to have two arguments to add these two values. And then I provided the calculation. And because this is an incomplete function in itself, it doesn't know what to add, I then provided the values. Now this is how you use Lambda function within a cell. But obviously this is very inefficient. Even if I'm creating my own function, I don't want to have this entire thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to create my own function, and I'll call it, let's say, add two numbers, or just add, and that would use this Lambda function in the backend. So the way this works is you need to create a named range and put this Lambda function in the named range so that you can then use the name of that named range as a function. So let me show you how it works. I would hold the control key and press the F3 key, so it opens the name manager. You can also do the same thing if you go to the formulas tab here and then click on name manager. Now when this name manager opens, click on the new option here, and here I'm going to create a new name. Now let me call this name add to number, and you can call it anything you want. And this is going to become my new function that I can use in the worksheet. And in refers to, I need to put that Lambda that I created, which would be with an equal to sign. So equal to Lambda A comma B and A plus B. And now when I click OK, my function has been created. Now I can go anywhere in my workbook and I would have this function add two numbers, and you can see it is now showing up in IntelliSense. If I double click on it, it will also show me the number of arguments which it takes, which is A and B. Obviously, it doesn't show me anything more as to what A and B should be, but it just tells me that it takes two arguments, which means it uses two arguments in the formula. And now I can come here, I can say A2, B2, and it works fine. Now, again, as I said, this is not impressive because I can do this either by just using A2 plus B2 or using a simple sum function. But now you understand that how to create a Lambda function and then put it in the named range so that you can name your own function and use it in Excel. So this is a very basic example. Let's move to something which is a little more complicated. Here I have these names, their region and their sales value, and I want to calculate the commission for them. Now, to calculate the commission, the condition is that if the sales value is more than 50,000, then the commission is going to be 5%. And if the sales value is less than 50,000, then the commission is going to be 3%. So I can create a simple if formula where I would check whether this cell value is more than 50,000. And if it is, then the commission here is going to be C2 multiplied by 5%. Else it is going to be C2 multiplied by 3%. And now when I hit enter, it gives me this result here, and I can drag it down for the entire column. Now let's create a Lambda function from this. So what I'm going to do is, first let me copy this formula here, and let me show you how to approach creating a Lambda function. So when you are creating a Lambda function, it is always first a good idea to create the function in the worksheet so that you know exactly what is the calculation you want to use. Then within this formula that I want to convert into a Lambda, see how many arguments it needs from the user, from me. How many arguments does it need? And in this case, this formula needs one argument, which is the cell reference that has the sales value, which is C2. This means that when I'm creating a Lambda function, this is going to be my parameter. This is going to be my only parameter because this is the only input it needs from the user. So I need to create a parameter that would give it the sales value, and then I can have the calculation, which is going to be this formula. So let me copy this formula and let's create that Lambda function. So here I need to provide the parameter, and as I said, there is only one parameter that I need, which needs to be the sales value. Let's call it sales. And then I need to provide the calculation, which is going to be this if formula here. But I also need to replace C2 with this parameter. So I would copy sales, and I would, instead of C2, I would put sales here. So what I've done is, with this very specific if function, I've created a Lambda out of it. And now if I want to test this Lambda, if I just hit enter here, it is going to give me calculation error. But if I want to test this Lambda, I need to provide the value. Let's provide this value here. And now I can check whether my Lambda function is working or not. So when I hit enter, it gives me this result, which is exactly the same as this one, and I can drag it down. So I know that my Lambda function is working. Now let's create my own function using this Lambda function. So I'm going to copy this part here, only the Lambda part here, because I do not need this argument here. So I'm going to remove this, and I've copied my Lambda function. Now I will hold the control key and press the F3 key so it opens the name manager. And here I'm going to click on new, and let me call this function salescom or sales commission. And in refers to, I'm going to paste the Lambda function that I created. And now when I click OK, it has created my Lambda function. You can double check that the formula is right. And now I can come here and I can use my Lambda function. I will use the name that I gave my Lambda function, which is salescom. And you can see it tells me that it only takes one argument, which is the sales argument. So I can come here, I can use this. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the result. So you can see I have taken a formula which was, although not very complicated to begin with, and I have converted into a Lambda function, which is so simple. It just takes one single argument. So if you are sharing this worksheet with someone else, or you have to use this formula multiple times in your own workbook, this is a lot easier to use as compared to this formula. But let's see if we make it a little more complicated, then what happens. Let's say in this case, I also have one more criteria where if the region is US, then the commission is going to be 5% no matter what. But if the region is not US, then the commission is going to be 5% for more than 50,000 value and 3% for less than 50,000 value. So now I will have to change this formula. So let me copy this and let me create a new formula where I would first check whether this is equal to US or not. And if it is equal to US, then my sales commission would automatically be 5%. Else I would have to then check the sales value, which would be this. If C2 is more than 50,000, then 5%, else 3%. So you can see now I have a formula which is slightly more complicated than the previous one because there are now more conditions. So if I want to convert this into a lambda, again, the same approach, you come here, you put the formula here in another cell and see how many arguments it is taking from the user, and it is taking 2 arguments, B2 and C2. So I'm going to have a lambda function which would have 2 parameters. So let's create that lambda function where there's going to be 2 parameters. The first one is going to be region, the second one is going to be sales, and then the calculation, which is going to be that if function. And this is my lambda function. Now I just need to replace B2 with the region and C2 with sales. So I can quickly do this here. And this becomes my lambda function. If I hit enter, obviously I get a calculation error. So I need to provide the values just to see that my lambda function is working. So this is my region value and this is my sales value, and I can see that my lambda function is working fine. So I can copy this function. Again, hold the control key, press the F3 key to open this, and let's just redo the sales commission function here itself. So I'm going to remove the old lambda function that I had and I would put the new one here. And now make sure that I have an equal to sign here. And now when I click OK, it should work. So let me remove this and let's say sales commission. And when I put it here, you can see now it takes 2 arguments, the region argument and the sales argument. The region argument is going to be this. The sales argument is going to be this. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the same result. Now, as you can see, this is slightly longer, complicated formula with 2 if functions as compared to a lambda function, which is just one single function which takes 2 arguments. So this is a lot easier to use. And as your formulas start getting complicated, you would realize that converting them into lambda function is going to be a lot more efficient for you. Now let me show you a couple more examples. So here I have this text in column A and I want to know what is the word count in each cell. So I can use a formula which is len, and I can first get the length of all these characters in this cell, and because I'm not sure whether there could be an extra space leading or trailing, I can use trim function. And now if I hit enter, it gives me the value 13, which is the total number of characters here. Then from this I'm going to subtract all the characters that are not space characters. So in this case, I'm going to first come here and I would use substitute function, and within substitute, let me use trim again, and I would use this. So within substitute function, this is my text. My old text that I don't want is a space character, and I want to replace it with a null character or blank, and this becomes my second len function. Now if I hit enter, it gives me 2 here because there are 2 space characters. And because I want to get the total number of words, I would have to add 1 to it. So I can add 1 here, and this is going to give me the total number of words in each of these cells. Now, if I want to convert this into a lambda function, again, very simple. We'll follow the same method I've followed in the last example. So I'm going to copy this formula here. Now I would see how many arguments it requires from me, which is just one single argument, A2, which is the cell that has the text. So I'm going to copy this here and I'm going to create a lambda function. Again, I'm hoping that now you are getting the drift of how the lambda function can be created. So I would just create this lambda function. Let's call this text, the argument, and then the function, which is this entire function. And now I can replace A2 with text. So A2 here, replace with text, A2 here, replace with text. This is my lambda function. Now, if I want to test my lambda function within brackets, I would just give this as the input. And now when I hit enter, it gives me 3. I can check this is working for all these cells. So I can now create my lambda function from this. So I would copy this part here, actually, including the equal to sign. So this I'm going to copy. Let me delete this. And let me hold the control key and press the F3 key. So it opens the name manager. Here I'm going to go to new and let me call this count words. And here in refers to, I'm going to put that lambda function. And now when I click OK, my lambda function is created. I can come here. I can use the function count words. You can see it shows up in the IntelliSense and it tells me it takes one single argument, which is the text. I come here, I select it. And there we have the total number of words in the cell. So again, I'm hoping you're getting how this Lambda function works. You have a formula, you can easily convert it into something very, very simple so that it takes 1, 2 or a couple of arguments and gives you the result instead of the long function. Let me show you one more example of Lambda function, which is slightly more complicated. And then I'm going to finally show you how to use recursive Lambda, which is something that you can only do with the Lambda function. It is also a lot more advanced than the functions that I'm showing you right now, but it is worth knowing. Here I have these product IDs and you can see it's alphanumeric characters. So there are numbers as well as alphabets or other characters such as hyphen. And I only want to extract the numbers here in this column. Now I can use a formula here. So let me show you how the formula is going to be constructed. So I'm going to use sequence, and within sequence, I'm going to use len, and I'm going to use this cell here. So what it is going to do is give me a sequence of numbers based on the length of this cell, which is going to be 5. So it gives me 5 here. If I use it for this cell A3, it is going to give me 8 because there are 8 characters in this cell. Now here, I'm going to use this within the mid function where this is my text, and the sequence function that gives me the sequence of numbers is going to be the start number. So it is going to take 5 different scenarios where in the first instance, it is going to consider 1 as the starting position, then 2 as the starting position, then 3 and so on till it has covered all these numbers. So this becomes my start number, and then the number of characters I want to analyze is 1. So now when I hit enter, it gives me these characters here in different rows. Now I only want to extract the numbers. So what I'm going to do is multiply this by 1. And when I do that, the characters that were text or not numbers would give me value error. And wherever there was a number, it was going to give me that number instead. Now I don't want these value errors. So what I'm going to do is use if error. And I would say if there is an error, then give me blank, else give me that number. So it removes the value error, but it gives me these numbers. And now I can simply combine them by using text join, where I would say I want to combine my delimiter is going to be nothing, null character, so just 2 double quotes, and I want to ignore empty cells, and I want to combine all these. So now when I hit enter, it gives me 2, 3, 1, and if I drag it for all these cells, you can see it works perfectly. So let me actually copy this formula and put it here. And now we are going to construct a lambda from this. So let me copy this entire formula, and you can see this is fairly complicated formula, and I'm going to use this for a lambda. Now again, the first way to approach lambda is see how many arguments it needs from me, and it just needs 1, which is this cell reference. So I would have a lambda with just 1 single parameter. So let me copy this. Let's create lambda where I would just call it maybe text or maybe product ID. And then I can have the function here, and then I would remove this reference A2 with the variable which is PD ID or product ID, and that's it. That is my lambda function. You can check whether it's working or not by giving this as an input to the lambda function. Now when I hit enter, it gives me the right result. I can drag this down, it's working perfectly. So now I can put the lambda function in the backend. I would copy this along with the equal to sign, hold the control key, press the F3 key, come here, click on new, and within new name manager, here I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it get num, and I can put the function here. So I have this function, it looks fine. You can double check the function in this case. Now I can remove this, and I can use my lambda, which is get num, and I can just click here and hit enter. And you can see now a complicated formula, fairly complicated formula, has become so easy where I can just use 1 single argument with the function name that I decided what it should be. And this is the power of lambda. It just simplified these things so much. Now I'm hopeful that I've shown you enough lambda examples so that you understand where it can be used, how it can be used, and the power of lambda function when working with complex formulas. But now let me show you an example, which is something that only lambda can do. And it actually makes it very, very useful when you want to loop through cells or when you want to call a function within a function. It's called recursive lambda. Here I have these names and I have these codes and the full country name here in a separate table. Now what I want to do is I have a name followed by a country code, and I want to replace that country code with the full country name based on this table. So if I have Scott, US, then I want to have the result as Scott, United States, and here Harvey, United Kingdom. Now, just to make things a little more interesting, I do not have country codes that are of the same length. So these are 2 letters as well as 3 letters. And I also have this situation where I have the name, but I have 2 country names. So I want the result where I want Steve, United States, United Kingdom. Maybe this is a person who's servicing 2 regions. So I want both the country names. Now I cannot do this with one single formula in Excel, but I can do this using Recursive Lambda. So what Recursive Lambda is going to do is it is going to go through all the cells here in this table and make the replacement. Now, before I get into the Recursive Lambda, let's say I ask you, how would you do it manually if you have to do it without any formula? Then what are you going to do is you're going to check each of these names, then check if the code exists in this list or not, and then make the replacement. Then move to the next cell and then again go through this list, make the replacement, and then move to the next one. So we are going to try and emulate the same thing using a Recursive Lambda. And another thing I want to show you is, before I go into the Recursive Lambda thing, if I want to do the replacement just for this one country code, which is US, if I just want to do it for this one country code, what I can do is use a substitute function, and within substitute function, this would become my text, which is what I want to replace, where I want to make the substitution. This is my old code, which is the old country code that is there in the name that I want to substitute. And these are the new country codes. And if I hit enter, it has made the substitution only for the US, but I want to do it for all the countries. So if I'm doing it using substitute function, I would have to do it probably 4 times. And I want to do the same thing using Recursive Lambda. So let's remove this. Let's create the Recursive Lambda. And let me first show you how that works. So I have some text here in this cell. Let me change the font color. So let me show you the construct of a Recursive Lambda. When you are creating one, there are going to be 4 segments. The first one is going to be the parameter. Now the parameter here would be the same as the substitute function that I showed you, because essentially what I'm trying to do is go through these names and make the substitution one by one for each of them. So I'm going to take 3 parameters, which the substitute function takes, which is going to be the names, the old code, and the new code or the full country name. And then I would have the if condition. And this is where the recursive nature of the Lambda comes in, because within if condition, I am going to check whether I have covered all these country codes or not. So I am going to loop through these codes, and then once I have completed these, which means when I've completed all these cells and I reach a cell that is blank, then I would know that my loop has completed. So my if condition is going to help me loop through them. And while I'm looping, if these cells are non-blank, then I'm going to use the substitute function to change these names. So when I'm considering US, I would change all the US to United States. And when I'm considering UK, I'm going to change all the UK to United Kingdom. And once my if condition is false, I would exit the loop. So let me do one thing. Let me first construct the Lambda function. And since this is a little advanced concept, I'm going to do it slowly and I'm going to explain each and every step. And once I have constructed the formula, I'm going to then explain it again. So let's start making that formula, and I'm going to do it in the formula bar here. So let's make that formula, which is going to be Lambda. One more thing before I get into the formula is I also need the name of the function. So in most of the cases, what I've done is I have named the function when I've reached the stage where I open the name manager and I put the formula and I give it a name. In this case, I would need that name beforehand. So although I'm not putting this formula because I don't have the formula as of yet, I still need that name. So let's say that I'm going to call my Lambda replace codes. So this is going to be the name of my Lambda function. I need this beforehand because I'm going to use it in the Lambda function I construct. That is how I'm going to call my Lambda function. So now let's start creating the Lambda function. Here I would say Lambda. Then I need to provide the parameters, which are going to be 3 parameters that I showed you in the substitute function, which is going to be names, which is going to be these names here. Then old code, which is going to be these old codes, or you can call it anything you want. I'm going to call it old code, and let me call these full country names as new code just for the ease of formula. And now I'm going to use the if condition, and within if condition, I need to check whether I've covered all these codes or not. So I'm going to say if old code is not equal to blank, which means that there are still, I've not yet completed this list. if that is the case, then I want to run my Lambda function. So I would say replace codes, which is this function that I'm going to name my Lambda, because I need to call this here. I've used this here. And then I would say substitute, and within substitute I would have names, which would be these names, and old code needs to be replaced with new code. So this becomes my substitute function. And now I'm going to offset the old code, which means that I'm right now, if my loop is running for the very first time, I'm right now in the US cell, and now I want to offset and go to the UK cell. This is how I'm going to loop. So I would say offset old code by 1 row, and let me break this formula so it's easier for you to see. So let me break it here. And I would say old code offset, and then I would offset the new code by again 1 row. So this is the part that is the looping that is happening. And now if this condition is false, which means that I've covered all these cells, I want to return names. Now I know this is too much to take in, so let me explain what is happening, but let me first construct the formula completely. So this has become my Lambda formula, and as of now, if I hit enter, it is going to give me calculation error, but I cannot even test this formula right now in the cell as I've done it with previous formulas, because it uses a name called replace codes and Excel has no idea what this is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this function, first create my Lambda function in the backend, give it a name, and then explain everything how it works. So let me press Control F3. It opens the name manager. Let me go to new, and here I'm going to use the same name, replace codes. It's very, very important that you use the exact same name, because if you don't, then this is not going to work, because it will not be able to call the right function. So it's very important that these names remain the same. And here I'm going to paste my formula and click OK. So replace codes function has been created. Now I can come here and I can use the function replace codes, and you can see it takes 3 arguments: name, old code, new code. These are my names. This is here, this cell D2 is the old code, and here E2 is the new code. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the right result, and you can see it has worked perfectly. Scott United States, so it works nicely. Let's see if it works for 3 alphabet country code. So yes, it has. And it has also worked for Steve US UK. You can see it has replaced US and UK both with the full name. So my Lambda function is working perfectly fine. Now let me quickly explain how I did it. So let me put my Lambda function here so that I can explain it to you how it works. So what is happening in this case is I have this data and I created a Lambda function, and I said this Lambda function is going to take 3 arguments: the names, the old code, and the new code, just this cell and this cell. And then I have this if condition where I say if my old code value is blank. So imagine that I run this function and this is the first loop. This is the first time this function is running. It is going to take these names. The old code value is going to be US and the new code value is going to be United States. But then it says if the old code value is not blank, which is going to be true because this is not blank, then it does the function, the replacement, where it substitutes names, as in these names, using the old code value, which is US, with the new code, which is United States. But in that first iteration itself, it offsets to the next line, which is UK and United Kingdom. And then because I have called this function, it is again run, the loop is again run, and it again comes back here. But this time the names is going to be the set where US has been replaced with United States already, because one loop has already run. And old code is UK now and new code is United Kingdom now. So now it again goes here, it checks if the old code is not blank, which is it is not because it is UK. So it does the replacement again for UK. Then it moves to the third row and it is called again. This time for France, it does the same thing. It makes the substitution for FR to France, and then it runs again. In the fourth time, it is India. It does all the substitutions, and when it is run and when it comes to this cell, so because it is getting offset every time, when it comes to this cell here, which is blank, this condition is no longer true. So it simply returns me the names, and in these names all the substitutions have already been done, US with United States, UK with United Kingdom, and so on. So it finally gives me these results. So what I've done is, with a lambda function, with a recursive lambda function, I've created something where it is looping through all these cells and doing some calculation, and when the given condition is true, it keeps on looping and keeps on doing the calculation, and as soon as the condition becomes false, it goes out of the loop. So this is how recursive lambda works. These are very powerful, and although it is a bit advanced and it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but once you identify and you understand the way it should be used, you can do some pretty advanced stuff with it, some pretty advanced data cleaning or data manipulation in your Excel using recursive lambda. I know this video has gotten a bit long and I've covered so many different examples, but I hope that by now you have a fairly good understanding on how to use the lambda function in Excel. So even if you're not using recursive lambda, you can still use lambda to simplify your work by converting complex formulas into something simpler, and you can give it your own name so you can create your own functions and make your work easier. That's it in this video. I hope you found this useful. Also, if you're liking these videos, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the bell icon so that you never miss out on any new Excel tips video I come up with. Thank you and have a nice day.